Hello and welcome to today's webinar. The title is DaaS or Not to DaaS in a Hybrid World. This event is presented in partnership with our friends over at Nutanix, and we'll have a special guest from Citrix. Now, before I introduce you to today's expert presenters, there's a few things that you should know about the event. My name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'll be serving as the host and moderator. As always, we want these events to be educational, and we encourage your questions. There's a lot of questions out there in the world about desktop as a service, VDI, end user computing, and we encourage your questions here on this live event. Experts from Citrix and Nutanix are standing by to answer your questions, so keep those questions coming. We even have a best question prize. I'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But first, I do want to point out that we've got some great resources there in the handouts tab of your audience console. I encourage you to check those out. And at the end of the webinar today, it'll be my pleasure to announce the winner of a $250 Best Buy e-gift card. If you're watching this recorded, of course, that drawing would have already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found right there in your handouts tab. All right, and then as I mentioned, we also have our best question prize. This is for an additional gift card, a $50 Best Buy e-gift card. That means you have to ask a question to be entered into the prize drawing, and it still must meet the prize terms and conditions. We'll select the best question prize winner and contact them after the event. All right, so with that housekeeping information out of the way, it's now time to welcome today's two expert presenters. Welcome to Sean Donahue, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager at Nutanix, and our special guest, Mr. Paul Murray, Solutions Architect for EUC at Citrix. Paul and Sean, it's great to have you on the event today. I'm going to first hand it off to you, Sean. Take it away.
Thank you, David. It is a pleasure to be here, but it's more of a pleasure to have my longtime friend and colleague, Paul Murray, joining us. Paul, welcome.
Afternoon, Sean. Good afternoon, good morning, whatever. Yeah, it's been a long time since we've spoken together on any sort of event or webinar or whatever. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is certainly a thrill for me too, because we're going to get into some subjects that we hold near and dear to our hearts, of course. But before we get into it, I'm legally obligated by the Marketing Council of the World to present some slides leading up to the conversation. And we are going to have a campfire conversation where we're going to field some questions that have been sliding into my DMs over Twitter and LinkedIn and whatnot. But before we get into that, Paul, and pull those questions, I want to set the table of what it is we're talking about and kind of give that framework here. And then I want to talk about some news and numbers that have been hitting the wires lately. And then, like I said, we're going to hit some Q&A. And the panel, of course, is me and Paul to make a panel in my world. If you can believe that. Now, what we're looking at here is that the platform that provides simplicity, choice, and flexibility when managing on-premises and cloud operations, we're demonstrating that customers can set up once and seamlessly adapt their operational model as their business evolves. And that's so critical, because who doesn't want that evolution within their business and their operating models? And Nutanix and Citrix are the leaders in this space. And Nutanix is the leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, if you're familiar with that, for hyper-converged infrastructure. And what I'm proud of, this is my bragging right now, Nutanix has an industry-leading NPS, that's Net Promoter Score, of greater than 90, which helps drive that customer retention, that customer devotion. And at the core of our DNA is to radically simplify how customers run apps, desktops, and manage data. And we are, Nutanix, we are the underpinning fabric of how modern business runs and how you succeed. And somebody should record that, because that my friends, makes a great voiceover, makes a great commercial. But I want to welcome everybody here because I want to mention that we're talking EUC, which is end user computing. But really, if you call it virtual desktop infrastructure or VDI, welcome. If you call it server-based computing still, if you call it remote desktop session host, welcome. If you call it desktop as a service, welcome. You're in the right place because all of these terms fall under that umbrella of EUC. So this is your safe space. However you identify those virtual desktops is the right thing to do, and you're in the right discussion. And to lend credence behind that, those market trends that are driving EUC, and you may be all too familiar with them, Nutanix is supporting you wherever and however you're driving towards EUC. Maybe you're on-prem. Maybe your entire EUC environment is on-prem. That fits the classical definition of virtual desktop infrastructure or VDI. Everything on-prem. Now, what's important to note about this, so if you're checking LinkedIn, if you're checking Twitter, come back to the screen here for just 1 second, because what's important to note about that is that the pundits that will be, the analysts that are judging or keeping their eyes on this market space are trending on-prem EUC down 1.4%. I want to find that interesting because I want to come back to it after we talk about Cloud DaaS. Right there on the right-hand side is Cloud DaaS. That's all in the public cloud. Yes, this one is trending to take over 10% of enterprise PC users, but then smack dab right in the middle is hybrid and multi-cloud. That's that mix of on-prem and cloud environments, and 83% of IT decision makers view hybrid as an ideal deployment model. But no matter where you fall on the spectrum here, Nutanix Cloud Clusters, Nutanix Cloud Platform, and Citrix are going to be able to cover you no matter where you are on that spectrum. But I did promise I wanted to come back to the on-prem EUC and that trending flat with a nominal decrease of minus 1.4%. I want to keep an eye on that because I'm going to put $20 down right now that predicts that people are actually going to start repatriating their workloads, where companies who were born in the public cloud may actually be repatriating those workloads out of the public cloud and back to on-prem and building out those data centers. So don't take that minus 1.4% as gospel as going to be written in stone. I predict that will flatten out and may even increase in the long run. But like I said, and I know everybody's sitting on the edge of their chairs because like I said, no matter how you define it, no matter how you call it, VDI, DaaS, SBC, it's big business and getting bigger. And Gartner is predicting that EUC, the EUC landscape and market, will be a $20 billion industry by 2030. And this is across geos as well. So however you're calling it, however you're referring to it, it is trending up and to the right, and it definitely is part of your business already. I'm going to make that bold statement, and will be and growing as well. But here we go. I have late breaking news coming in across the teletype, and I don't want to steal Paul's thunder here. But we have late breaking news. We have news, if you have seen it on the wire, in the ether. Citrix made an announcement lately, the Citrix Universal subscription. And like I said, I don't want to steal Paul's thunder, even though my nickname in high school was Sean Thunderstealer Donahue. The reason that Citrix Universal has me so excited is that because of how tightly it aligns and integrates with the Nutanix VDI license model. And instead of doing complex sizing exercises, You buy based on the concurrent users at any given time. And in fact, the math that you use to calculate in one model, Citrix licensing model, let's say for Citrix Universal Subscription, can be applied to your Nutanix VDI license acquisition. And it basically is like I got through accounting classes in college. You copy the math from one and you apply it to the other and you get through. But the Citrix Universal Subscription, I know there's questions coming up based on that, and being able to run Citrix anywhere on-prem in a private data center, in a managed cloud provider, in an IT managed cloud infrastructure, but deliver those apps and desktops from anywhere, again, on-prem, hybrid cloud, as we mentioned before, and the hyper-converged environment. And if you ask me, I think the Nutanix logo should actually be up, trending up and to the right, because Nutanix really crosses all of those, not just pigeonholed into the hyper-converged. So what does that mean? I'm going to bring Paul, if you're ready. I'm going to usher you to the virtual stage right now because I want to sit down, and I actually added this picture thinking of you, Paul, because I know you're an outdoors woodsman living in, where are you again, Paul? Remind me.
Sweden. So
Sweden.
I live literally in the middle of the countryside in a forest in Sweden. So that campfire is pretty much the right picture, to be honest.
I thought it would, and I did. I did a Google image search for Paul Murray campfire, and that's what I came up with. I had to crop you out.
If you look on Facebook, probably every third picture is a picture of a bonfire out in the garden.
Yep, that was the inspiration behind it. But Paul, I've had questions, as the kids say these days. I've had people sliding into my DMs with questions surrounding Nutanix and Citrix and, of course, EUC. And I wanted to bring you in and kind of ask some of those questions and get the master to answer the questions, if that's all right with you.
So I'm not sure about master, but yeah, I mean, we can go through them. I mean, we both worked at both companies, so yeah, let's go through.
Yeah, well, they weren't available, so it's me and you. So there you go. But here's question number one, coming out from Ned in the Netherlands. How does the Citrix hybrid strategy align with Nutanix? And I think that's a great one because Nutanix and Citrix have been partners for well over a decade. And the partnership is, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it's getting better. And I like to say it's like a 10-year plus marriage, but the kids have moved out of the house and we're on to a second honeymoon. But so
I think second honeymoon is probably the best way of saying it, because it's not always been the best of friends. I mean, there's a few years ago where various things happened, but I, like you say, today the partnership is strong. It's very, very strong. I mean, I know you've worked at Citrix. I've worked at Citrix before, and then went to Nutanix and come back to Citrix. The partnership has always been strong, and I think when you talk about Citrix, the Citrix hybrid strategy, or what we just started to talk about with destination hybrid, is, I mean, I'll describe it the best way with I mean, Nutanix has always talked about one platform to run apps and data anyway. I mean, previously that was cloud on your terms, I think. But essentially, the Nutanix concept, the Nutanix idea was to have this single platform where you run your workloads. Now, without being derogatory, in the Nutanix world, Citrix is just a workload. It's just an application that runs on the Nutanix platform. But the destination hybrid, what that means to Citrix, or what that means in our world, is, like you said earlier, or like you showed earlier, the numbers. Customers don't want to be tied into on-prem or cloud only. They want this choice. I know you should never talk about politics and religion, but there's always these extremes of left and right, or right and wrong, or whatever. Now, this hybrid story, to me, it's the ideal middle, where as a customer, I've got certain requirements for my workloads, my applications on that Citrix workload. Some could be on-prem destined, some could be cloud or public cloud destined, or run better in the public cloud. So what this destination hybrid means is it allows me as a customer to choose where do I run those applications, where it makes most sense. Tie that into your the previous statement about the universal subscription. What that also means is, as a customer, I know it's maybe an easy way of saying it, I simply acquire licenses, and it gives me the right to run those applications and the Citrix workloads where it makes most sense. And that's it. Hybrid is the destination. I mean, a cloud journey. I don't think it's ever been a destination. It's always a journey, and this hybrid stuff allows you to move as you need to, as you.
Yeah, and if you remember, and I'm sure you do, a couple of years ago, everything was cloud. It wasn't, that hybrid was the destination. It was you're going from on-prem, and the vendors out there were pushing cloud. Everything to the cloud. Every workload is in the cloud. Every environment is in the cloud. It's for every use case, every scenario, you name. Cloud was just everywhere. And I coined the phrase and registered the domain cloudnauseum.com because Cloud Nauseum was getting marketing messaging on cloud to the point of nausea. So Cloud Nauseum was my domain. And I'm so glad to see that hybrid is the destination. And with Nutanix and Citrix being that fabric that blends them all together, you can run on-prem, you can run in the cloud, you can meet in the middle with true hybrid, and it's great to see.
And you mentioned it as well. You're seeing a lot of posts on LinkedIn or wherever about companies wanting to come back from the cloud, whatever that means. If I was an IT manager, like I said, it's very simple to say. I want the choice of where to run that application, where it makes most sense. And this is what the hybrid stuff is all about.
Yep. And I had mentioned the stat in there that the on-prem trending down minus 1.4%. But what you said is that repatriating the workloads off the cloud back to on-prem or back to a hybrid environment for between the two, even companies that were born, quote unquote, in the cloud, repatriating and building their own data centers. So it's a very fluid environment, and in that universal subscription and the Nutanix VDI licensing being pinned to just the number of users and not the underpinning sizing requirements is masterful, absolutely masterful. But Paul, tell me, I want to get a little tech, a little 200 level 200 here with you. To tell me, just with that level 200 technical lens, about the destination hybrid.
Okay. So think quickly. So I think the quickest way of explaining it would be, again, go back to the numbers that you showed earlier. So I got different numbers from a different survey. So the guys, what was it, DaaS Like a Pro. So they run a yearly survey, the State of the EUC Union, and some of the numbers in there were quite eye-opening. So they had, I think, just to read them off the screen, was 35% of the respondents use hybrid on-prem and public cloud, not or, hybrid on-prem and public. Another 30% use on-prem, and the remaining sort of 35% they use only public cloud. So that could be only public cloud with a single provider or multiple providers. But what's interesting there is 65% of those respondents have a mix of on-prem and public cloud. So this hybrid world that we were talking about. Now, people may disagree. Citrix is still a leader in this EUC world. We've still got best-in-class technologies when it comes to providing that user experience or that employee experience. So when I talk, if I try to describe the technical story around destination hybrid, it's around two or three things. It's the management. I need a set of technologies that allows me to be able to manage my infrastructure, whether that is on-prem or cloud-based or wherever. So talk about technologies or product features. So we have a thing called Citrix Studio, which manages your on-prem stuff. There is then the cloud control plane, which allows you to manage your cloud world. Today, they're two distinct or disparate consoles. Now, going forward, the idea is to bring those consoles together. So we've got that first step where we have web console on-prem. So admins, again, it's probably derogatory. I call them the cloud kids or the cloud admins. They don't need to understand the underlying technology, the underlying infrastructure. They just want to go click and provision 1,000 virtual machines, 1,000 desktops. So the cloud control plane will allow you to do that. Now we're bringing that same concept to on-prem. So similar to the Nutanix story with that simplicity or the benefits of public cloud, but on-prem, we're doing the same when it comes to management or making sure these instances, these environments are up and running.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, Studio is one of the several integration points with Nutanix, isn't it?
Yes. So if you need to, again, stay with that example of provisioning machines. So as an administrator, what I do is go to Studio. I would say I go through the menus. I get to the point where I've typed in 1,000 machines. I then need to provision those 1,000 virtual machines. That will then hand it off to the Nutanix architecture, Nutanix cluster, and Nutanix, knowing what it needs to do on the hypervisor level and the storage level, will go off and say, all right, 1,000 virtual machines, I'll provision those. And then we've got that plumbing or that connection to where that cluster is running. So if it's on-prem, it will provision them on-prem. If it's Nutanix cloud clusters, for example, it's going to provision them in the cloud, in the public cloud. So in the console, we tell it what to do. Nutanix then comes along and says, I know where I'm running. Do I provision it on-prem or cloud or wherever?
Yeah. And there's, I don't want to spoil the ending or the call to actions that we're going to have David come back in and help us with, but there actually is a test drive available where the customer can actually experience that for themselves. So don't just take my word for it. Don't just take Paul's word for it. You can actually roll up your sleeves and get into it with the test drive. And in that exact scenario, bursting thousands of desktops to AWS in the cloud. So it's a great thing. But yeah.
I mean, just to finish this piece, so I think the other important piece around the hybrid story is, I briefly touched on it, is the user experience. So HDX. Now, HDX is often assumed that HDX is just the protocol. So transmitting those bits and bytes of the screen images from the endpoint to the server, from the server down to the endpoint. HDX is a lot more. HDX is a set of technologies that's got the ability to understand given conditions, conditions such as network connectivity, security posture, the device that I'm running on. And then based on those conditions, then say, okay, I know I'm running on a low performing network. So let me push this information down to the employee, the user, in the best possible format. Another example, I know I'm in a highly secure environment. I want to disable certain functionality on the endpoint. And that's where this hybrid story becomes important. It's the user experience as well. It's not the product name, but I think Calvin, our VP, said it's the hybrid delivery experience. So again, HDX technologies, they fit elegantly into this hybrid world.
Yeah. And if you're sitting there, if you're an old school guy like me, and you're sitting there and you just equate HDX as the rebranded of the ICA protocol, like Paul just said, there's a lot more to it than just screen scraping off the server, virtual apps, and desktops down to the endpoint client. I love that. Love it. But Paul, let's switch gears. You can't have a webinar today, and I'm going to say for the next 3 years, you can't have informational session today without talking about March of 2020 and what customers faced and what they actually had to do in regards to rushing to deploy some sort of a stopgap solution when everybody was forced to stay home and work hybrid. That old joke of it's the year of VDI that we used to say from 2009. In every year, if you remember Brian Madden getting up on stage saying, this is the year of VDI, this is the year of VDI, year after year. March of 2020 was the actual year of VDI with the rush to work from home. So customers that rush to deploy virtual desktops to respond to that need, they're in a position where they kind of have to grow and add new capacity, maintain business continuity, and then the environments that they burst to or responsively deployed in 2020 now have to become mature and permanent fixes. What do you have to say or recommend about that?
So it's actually a Nutanix solution or benefit feature, if you want. I mean, in that sense, the Citrix story, whether it's on-prem VDI or whether it's DaaS, is the same. I mean, we're providing an employee access to that remote desktop through some sort of protocol. Now, if you sort of take it as a given that the application performance is good, that you've done all your testing, you know the applications run okay. Like I said, it's just an application that you connect to. Now, to make that scalable, to make it possible to add capacity as you need, that's the Nutanix architecture. I mean, like I said, I worked there 5 years. I talked about it day in, day out. It's that predictable linear scalability. So if you started back in March 2020, where you needed to spin up a Nutanix cluster, again, that's a very, very simple thing. You spun up a Nutanix cluster with 4 nodes for a couple of hundred, maybe 1,000 users or whatever, and you now need to expand that cluster. So, okay, it's not reality, but skip 3 years to March 2023. We've still got that original cluster. We need to expand it. Now, with the Nutanix one-click expansion, essentially what you do is you add in additional hardware. That probably is newer hardware. So different types of CPU generations, faster storage, faster networking, stuff like that. But because of the Nutanix architecture, you still have this single cluster or this single entity of resources. It doesn't matter whether you have older hardware and newer hardware in there. The architecture knows where to run those workloads most effectively. If you want to continue to expand that, so for example, going from 2,000 or 1,000 to 2,000 or 3,000 users, again, same process, add in additional hardware. That's where that linear scalability comes from. Why?
Yeah.
I was going to say, why technically? Because the way the Nutanix stuff works is, I lost my thread now, is, go and ask your question, it'll come back to me.
Well, what I was going to say is that, the infrastructure that I deployed my VDI on in a rush 3 years ago just may not be keeping up with the because I'm adding capacity along the way. It wasn't just to fill that need of the overnight remote work and hybrid work styles, but it's being added on. We're adapting, we're growing it. And like I like to say, the pants that I sized out for myself 3 years ago or 5 years ago, they don't fit anymore. And I have to resize them. And I would love to be able to just linearly scale everything that is around me.
I mean, so in technical terms, I mean, you mentioned it there, you need to resize it. Resizing doesn't mean you need to throw away the old hardware. Take an example of, so 3 years ago, we had Windows 10. So Windows 10 build whatever took a certain amount of resources. 3 years later, a few more builds of Windows 10. We're now on Windows 11. That has different requirements in terms of CPU resource, memory consumption, vCPUs and stuff like that. So we need to resize the workload, yes, but Nutanix has a tool, the Sizer, which will take you through that process. And I know a lot of people do not want to believe these sort of automated routines. You type in the numbers. If you put in correct numbers or realistic numbers, it's going to create a configuration. That new configuration can be added into the existing cluster. If you want to burst the cloud, so take an example there, you talked about bursting to 2,000 users to the cloud. The Nutanix cloud clusters, or NC2, will allow you to do that. You have this common master image. You're going to burst that out to the cloud. So an example there would be, was it Black Friday you got in the States where everybody goes crazy? The IT guys don't know the load, don't know what the load will be on that server infrastructure. So use AWS or GCP or Azure or whatever as a platform and Nutanix clusters to burst out to that cloud infrastructure.
Yeah. And you've just suddenly become the elastic waistband of infrastructure. If I bring it back to the pants metaphor, it just grows dynamically and then can even shrink as dynamically as well. But Paul, I want to get one more question related to this as well, which was, what do you see as the easiest, the most avoidable performance bottleneck in these environments?
So I got two answers. One is flippant, cynical, sarcastic, and one is reality. So the easiest way is the Citrix Workspace app nowadays. You've got the ability to swap out the logo. So instead of having Citrix in the corner, you can put whatever you want in the corner. And then people are going to blame whatever that logo is. So being realistic for a moment, I mean, again, it goes back to the way the Nutanix architecture works. The way the Citrix architecture wants the underlying infrastructure to work. So if you think about it, a Citrix workload is a set of virtual machines. That is going to work most effectively or with the best performance on locally attached storage. You have your CPUs, your memory, and your storage on the same box. ACI, hyper-converged infrastructure. That's what Nutanix is all about. So the best performance you will get is always with locally attached storage, compute, memory, or whatever. Now, without Nutanix, the way around that was the industry introduced a thing called SAN, so storage area networks, or network attached storage or whatever. So you're getting the storage across the network. It works, but it introduces a performance impact. Now, the Nutanix architecture, what you do, you know this, you take all the local storage on those physical nodes, you create a single storage fabric, and you present that back to the virtual machine, in this case, Citrix workloads. Now, the clever bit is those workloads, or the storage that those workloads consume, are on the physical machines where that virtual machine is running. So they are using local storage, but you get the benefits of distributed management, simplified management, high availability, disaster recovery, that cloud burst that we talked about. So that's when you can talk about how to avoid the performance bottlenecks. Is we're getting around the concept of 3-tier storage and using, simply put, locally attached storage to run your workloads.
Yeah. And you get the user experience, you get the performance, and you still get the inherent security that you have with VDI and all those workloads being locked in the corporate vault or the data center, wherever you're managing it from. Paul, I'm afraid that we're getting the warning here that our back is against the wall time-wise, and but I really appreciate you taking the time to answer some of those questions that are coming out, because I know people are concerned. They've got subscription, license renewals coming out with Citrix. They're looking at the subscription models. They're looking at the infrastructure that they deployed 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and they're looking at ways to capitalize and expand on that. And I think we had a great session here. And like we mentioned earlier, that customers don't have to take our word for it. They can actually go up to the test drive, Nutanix.com/Citrix, Nutanix.com/test drive, and they can actually experience it for themselves with a hands-on follow through the story lane on actually bursting desktops to the cloud. And it's a great, great experience. Paul, I want to thank you for your time here today. It was so good to see you. So great to be online with you. Love keep catching up with
Yeah,
you.
I've missed your late nights radio DJ voice. No, I'm not saying that you put people to sleep, not at all. But it's
Yeah. No, I will happily record voiceovers for you. I'll even record children's stories if you want to play those. But
no, my pleasure, Sean. My pleasure.
but I want to bring David Davis back on to close us out because David, we had an amazing, amazing conversation, and I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great discussion, Paul and Sean. I learned a lot. I know the audience did as well. I love the opportunity for that test drive, Nutanix.com/Citrix. Thank you to Nutanix and Citrix for being on the event today. And Paul and Sean, special thanks to you. And it's now my pleasure to announce the winner of our Best Buy $250 e-gift card. This is going out to Edgar Sanchez, who is an IT manager in Texas. Congratulations to Edgar Sanchez from Texas. We'll also be reaching out to our Best Question Prize winner as well. Thank you to everyone who joined us on the webinar today. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.